Hello, my dear viewers. This amazing story will be very instructive for you. It is very interesting and beautiful. I wish you enjoy watching it. Dark deeds like a special atmosphere. Could they do evil in bright halls with wide windows and high ceilings? Billy, whose reputation in this Washington neighborhood was hardly unequivocal, received his guest in a cramped room with shabby walls. Both the owner and his guest sat on old boxes and smoked cheap tobacco. It was clear from the look in the underground office owner's eyes that Evan's offer interested him. "You say he's selling his daughter?" Billy asked and winked. An unhealthy excitement appeared in his eyes. "Not his daughter, but his stepdaughter," Evan corrected in his husky voice. "And he's not selling, he's renting. Just getting started." "What? Did she come up with all this on her own?" "Yeah," Evan sighed. "She hired me. Just to be on the up and up. She says you're the neighborhood's go. To guy for this kind of thing." "How old is she?" Billy asked. 42, he replied. "Some kind of elderly daughter," the owner smiled. "I mean stepdaughter." "Oh, that one." Evan slapped himself on the forehead. 16. She's a big girl. She can be, hey, her. But you know what I need her for, don't you?" Billy asked, moving in close and wrapping his dirty arm around his neck. "What I'm paying money for, huh?" "I don't know," Evan replied evasively, taking his palm away and moving away. "We're adults. We understand everything." He liked the man in the black t-shirt and leather jacket less and less. But Julia claimed he had money, so he continued the dialogue. It was he, Evan, who had asked to meet Billy. It was he who had voiced to him an offer that any normal man should refuse. But this smoker probably wasn't one of those. "Show me the picture," the customer demanded, and blew a streak of smoke into the yellow ceiling. Evan pulled out his cell phone from his pocket, which must have been hit not by a roller, but by a convoy of special vehicles. Billy saw a charming young woman on the thick grid of cracks in the screen. You couldn't tell. She was 16 years old. She looked much younger. Just what he needed. A voluptuous smile appeared on his face and a shroud of excitement came over his eyes. "I'm buying," Billy said, and licked his lips. "I'll take it. I'll rent it for one night." "No," Evan said. "That's not gonna work." Julia said she wanted to sell it to 3 men at once, minimum. "Why is that?" Billy asked unhappily. "Why?" Evan was surprised. 3 men would pay more. And only for one night. "And you'll have to put it back where you found it, huh?" Billy leaned back in his seat. It looked like he was in a cozy chair, not an old African coffee crate. He took another disgusting cigarette out of his pocket and smoked it. Slowly he blew the smoke into the ceiling, thinking about something. "Okay," Billy yawned. "I got a couple friends, but let's make a deal. We buy first, when your missus says so. If she wants it tomorrow, she can have it tomorrow. If we're not first, if we're second, the deal's off. And you should know what happens to people who cheat me." Billy squinted his eyes, and his look was indeed scary. The visitor wrinkled his nose. He didn't want to think about what sacks this black man's cheats were kept in. The firsts. "Julia says there are more hunters," Evan said, and there was no fear in his voice. "If you're taking a deposit, I'd—" "Wait, a deposit," Billy snapped at him. "How much does Julia want for the merchandise?" Evan licked his cracked lips. He'd never held a lot of money in his life. He'd often been cheated, so he'd accomplished nothing by the time he was 50. His union with Julia was the only achievement he wasn't ashamed of. "So all we want is $1 million, Evan said. He tried to sound determined, but came out more like a laugh. "And 20 now," Evan added. "Right this minute," Billy laughed. He put out his cigarette in the old saucer that was his ashtray and slowly looked up at his companion. The pause must have lasted an eternity, But the visitor endured it. "1 million, you say?" the owner asked. "I'll give you 300,000, 100 each. That's good money. In the morning we'll put it back as good as new, only better, and you'll keep renting it out, so to speak." "Proven." Julia said 1 million. Evan repeated stubbornly. "Uncle, think about it," Billy exclaimed and smiled. 1 million for what? For a little girl who doesn't know how to do anything? Do you know what we'll do to her for that money?" "Do what you want," Evan exhaled. "But that's the price, and the deposit is required." The owner looked at his interlocutor appraisingly, as if he was trying to figure out if he was joking or telling the truth. "Let's summarize," Billy said. "You two are asking me for $1 million so that I can come down here with 2 of my buddies and spend the day with my stepdaughter." "Yeah," Evan nodded. "That's right. And if you don't want to take it, somebody else will. Washington's just around the corner." "Well," Billy asked and stood up. He would have liked to walk around his den, which he solemnly called his office, but it was too cramped. So he just held his hands up in the air to show his superiority. Then he took 4 bills out of his wallet and tossed them in the direction of his interlocutor. "Are we going to bargain over such a charming girl? First-class merchandise. If the stepmother wants $1 million, that's fine. We'll give her $1 million. Just be honest with me, Evan. Do you realize what we can do to her?" "Sure," he answered. His eyes lit up at the sight of the brand new $5,000 bills. "That's why the price is so high. You said it yourself. It's first class." 2 minutes were required for formalities. The owner of the den wrote down the address of his guest and his phone number on a pack of cigarettes. "All right. Go on," Billy waved his hand. "Go on. Tell the landlady we're at her place tomorrow night. Now I've got to call my buddies. You realize you have to be prepared for a rendezvous like this." Evan turned to leave, but Billy grabbed his shoulder. The guest felt that the dark man had fingers of steel. He squeezed his muscles painfully, which made Evan feel the pain and groan a little. He was suddenly uncomfortable with the sound. "One more thing," Billy said in a steely voice. "If you lie or tell anyone, you'll both be dead before morning. Is that clear?" Evan swallowed nervously and nodded. He wanted to turn around, but the dark man's grip was too strong not to move. It was as if the man had his shoulder in a vise. "That's it. Go," Billy said, and pushed the visitor away. "Okay, the phone." He took a quick step toward the door, opened it, and disappeared into the dark hallway. Stepping outside, Evan wiped the sweat from his forehead. Talking to this man had made him a little uncomfortable. Fortunately, Billy had already lost interest in him. He swiped his finger across the phone screen, searching for the right contact. If Evan knew who Billy was writing to and how it would end, he would turn gray with horror and take it all back. Angelica had long since gotten used to not being allowed to do anything. Her entire childhood is a series of disappointments, hardships, and losses. First, her mother left her life. At that time, the girl was too young, and even the face of her mommy did not remember, only her eyes. Then Aunt Julia appeared in her life, a stepmother she hated. However, the feeling they had was mutual. As long as her father had been alive, he'd been able to smooth things over a bit. At least he liked to think so. But when Angelica started 2nd grade, Daddy was gone. And with him, those few warm minutes that she still had in reserve. The girl knew for sure that this private house near Washington belonged to him. After all, she had been born here, and her mother had rocked her here. But after Daddy's death, it turned out that Angelica was the one who came here. So she doesn't belong here. She can't have anything. While the children at school were beautiful things, received as a gift gadgets and toys, the girl had to be content with what gave kind people. However, only with poverty was still possible to put up with. "But where are you going?" her stepmother shouted when she saw Angelica in the living room. "I told you not to go into the bright rooms." She not only kept the girl in a black body, but also limited her space to the basement. It had once been Dad's garage and storage room, but now it was Angelica's room. Instead of a cozy bathroom, which was on the first floor, a ridiculous bathroom where you had to wash yourself in a basin, pouring cool water from a hose. "This is my house too," replied Angelica, and was immediately slapped. The stepmother had a strong arm. "Nothing is yours here," Julia said. "It's all mine." This guilt that the stepmother instilled in the girl was the hardest thing to bear. She was so embarrassed about her father. When he died, it turned out that the car, the house, and the appliances were all in debt. At least that's what Aunt Julia said. She said she couldn't bear to look at the girl, so she made her move into the basement. "I can't bear to think that because of you, I am wasting so much of my strength," screamed stepmother. "If it were not for you and your father, I would have long gone abroad. If I lived in Germany, I wouldn't have to worry. But as it is, I work day and night." Julia was incredibly enterprising. She built a small house on the property, which she turned into a lodging house. In time, they learned the more euphonious name of hostel. Angelica had to run home after school to clean, change the laundry clean, and wash something endlessly. It was especially hard on weekends. You could spend many hours on your feet. Now the girl wanted to learn something, and at the same time, to become an adult. "I'm a big girl," Angelica said, rubbing her bruised cheek. "Since I'm registered here, I can go wherever I want. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Look how smart you are," Evan grunted. His voice was old and creaky as a tire, but at least he'd never laid a hand on the girl. "When you grow up, you can have your own opinion. Don't stop me from raising that ungrateful girl," Julia interrupted him. "You're as worthless as she is. You're all sitting on my neck with your legs hanging down. I don't know how to talk to that ugly, twisted girl." Every conversation, even the most innocuous, ended in a fight. And the only reason they had the same reason was the disgusting character of the stepmother. Not once during the whole time they lived together she never said a nice word to the girl. Not once praised, and after the death of her father, constantly humiliated instead of support. "I'm leaving," Angelica said, gathering her courage. "That's it. I was given my certificate. Now I can go. I'll study and you'll be proud of me. Someday." "What are you talking about?" Julia's neck popped out in surprise. "Come here and tell me to my face. Where do you think you're going?" The new scandal was about to get bigger than the last. Julia had applied to college not just in another district, but in another region. Thankfully, she didn't have to go anywhere to get in because she didn't even have money for a bus pass. Literally a day later, she received a message. She had been accepted, and they were waiting for her to sign the documents. As soon as Julia found out this information, she was literally furious. "You're not going anywhere," shouted stepmother. "I won't let you go. Yes, you are nothing untalented and a disaster. But you're mine. You're my responsibility." "But Aunt Julia," Angelica said, "I'll have a scholarship and a dormitory. I'll live there, study. I'll get a part-time job. I won't have to pick your pocket anymore." "Look at her planning," Julia blurted out. "I'm your legal representative. I won't let you in, and that's the end of it. You can smash my head against the wall." "What am I supposed to do?" Angelica asked. From the stepmother's statement, she literally lost the ground from under her feet. "To work," the woman answered in an unexpectedly calm voice. "And give me the money. How am I going to take away your scholarship, eh?" "Yes, and it's crumbs. A salary is another matter. But I'm already working," Angelica begged. "Is that work, you ungrateful girl?" Indignant stepmother. "It is your sacred duty. Do I have to hire a cleaning lady to scrub the toilet for all these builders? That's it, get out of the clean rooms. Go back to your darkness." It was like a spring had been pulled out of Angelique. She all bent and crouched and walked toward the stairs. The stone steps were polished by her feet. The whole world she had dreamed of was gone, dissolved. "You owe me?" shouted Julia at the girl's back. "You owe me a fact. I raise you, I deny you everything. I pay your debts for your stupid daddy. You're just an ungrateful bitch. That's what you are." Angelica wanted to cry, but there were no tears left in her deep blue eyes. She knew nothing but humiliation and hardship in this family. She wanted to run away, but where to? She had no friends. Who would want to socialize with a girl dressed in old worn-out clothes, who didn't even have enough money for a bus pass? It remained to sit in her basement, read books, and sneakily use the cell phone that her stepmother gave her. After all, sometimes she needed to find her stepdaughter to load her with new tasks. Angelica's statement shocked the lady of the house. For days, Julia pondered what kind of work to assign her stepdaughter, in addition to cleaning the hostel. She is 16 years old. The maximum that the girl could count on was some kind of part-time work for pennies. Well, she'll get 10 or 15,000 a month. That's nothing. It takes more than that for her meager food. Where do teenagers get paid more than adults? What occupation can they get a good deal on? "Eureka!" Julia shouted and called out to her stepdaughter. "Julia, I'm here. Anyway, I've got an idea. You know what you're going to do now? Just don't make a face, okay?" Stepmother's words made Angelica dizzy. She couldn't even dream that Aunt Julia could do such disgusting things. A feeling of joyous excitement overwhelmed Billy. At last he had found something to do. He had been looking for his chance in this godforsaken neighborhood for a long time. Here he was known and trusted by all the inhabitants of the dark world. Billy sometimes bought stolen goods, but he specialized in beggars. He had a whole troop of select beggars at his command. Old, shabby, forgotten, and abandoned by all. They begged alms and listened attentively to the locals. They socialized with other rejected people. And in the evenings, they told Billy everything in detail. Information about the neighborhood, where things lay and who had them, was very expensive, and the beggars themselves brought in a good income. For 2 years now, he'd been working on his reputation, bribing other members of the dark world and looking for a new niche. Billy had been waiting for a long time when the door of his makeshift office would open and a man with a tempting offer would appear on the doorstep. Of course, his appearance was shabby, but it was the product that mattered, not the merchant. Such a business was to be reported even higher up. Everywhere there is a hierarchy. Now the meeting was set. The man fixed his greasy hair and looked through the peephole before opening the door of his closet and stepping out into the common corridor. Saw a silhouette. Billy, a pro-cop familiar homeless man of indeterminate years, stood on the doorstep asking for help. "Billy, help me out." "God will help," Billy replied, pushing him away and moving down the dark hallway to his car. "Billy," he called out again and shuffled ludicrously after him. "Billy, give me a job." "God will provide," Billy said, and quickened his pace. But the beggar kept up his waddling. "Come on, Billy," he said, and using a forbidden trick, he overtook him and stood right in front of him, taking hold of the hem of his black jacket with his dirty hands. "Take me on your team, Billy. I'll beg you. I'll get a beating. Oh, I'll get a beating." "Get out of my way," Billy shouted. "Nobody's going to give it to you. Didn't anyone ever tell you I don't work with drunks, especially blue ones like you?" "That's insulting. I haven't had a drink for 2 days already," replied the petitioner. "The pipes are all red. They're burning." Billy sighed. The rules of his business are strict. There are several categories of beggars to whom people give willingly. First of all, they are old ladies. The image of a defenseless grandmother immediately comes to mind. The legacy of the 90s. Secondly, the disabled. Looking at a crippled person, you immediately want to pay him off, to throw a coin, just to pass by and not feel guilty. The most willing mothers with children, though. But Billy didn't work with them. It's the wrong times. There's 10 inspectors for every negligent mother. They'll cut off the oxygen before you can even move. However, as you can see, the authorities only look after small children. Otherwise, how else would he have been offered a 16-year-old girl to buy? Well, Billy, Prokop stretched out. Give me at least 100. For a hangover. Billy pulled a crumpled bill out of his pocket and threw it on the floor. The overjoyed alcoholic immediately dropped to his knees and picked up the $1 with trembling hands. There was real joy on his face. He had forgotten all about work. Today he could afford a shot, and tomorrow would be what would happen. The man Billy was going to meet did not discuss matters over the phone. Only a face-to-face meeting. It was supposed to be signaled and signaled back. The chances of a celestial making time for you were practically non-existent. But today, luck was on Billy's side. Literally half an hour after Evan left, he saw a message in the secret chat room, which dissolved into the bowels of the internet in a couple minutes. On the old one, an hour later, there was a reply. Billy got into his old Ford, which was literally falling apart from time. The body was rotten, pieces were falling off the sills and fenders. The door closed only on the third try. The lock was defective. There were no bumpers on the front or back. He had removed them for lack of use. The man turned the key, and the engine coughed harshly, like a decrepit old man. But it started. Old means inside an abandoned public restroom. It's a dead place. Only the most desperate people go there to pee. The smell was disgusting. Billy wore a gauze mask that had been in his jacket since the pandemic. He went into a dark room where one stall was closed. Faint light streamed in from the tattered windows with broken panes of glass, and the room was dusky. Now that's what I mean, Billy said the cipher loudly. Communism. Everything is free. Like they say, how do you charge a man if he needs to relieve himself? Too bad there are no lights. I totally agree, answered the older man from inside the stall. But he didn't open the door. Are you alone in there? Yeah, said the man. We should choose another place to meet. This place stinks too much. Put on a respirator like I did, the older man said. Well, spit it out, since you came to me to relieve yourself. You wrote me that you had something good to tell me. I hope that's true. You realize how much my time is worth, and what I'm risking by wasting it on you, you sick bastard. So I've decided to buy a little girl, said Billy in a carefree voice, as if he'd never heard a rebuke from his leader. A little one? The older man asked suspiciously. Well, Billy shrugged his shoulders. 16 if they're not lying. Looks younger than... Fitz, the older man interrupted. Who's selling? Mother. Stepmother, actually. The older man laughed. The respirator distorted his voice. Renting, you say? What are you going to do with her? I'll get it all on camera, Billy replied. I'll make a good movie. What? Alone? The older man was surprised. How in God's name are you going to shoot and work? I've already called Archie and Harvey, the man explained. There was silence. The older man's word is law. If he told him to give up this fool's errand, he'd have to obey. Although Billy felt in his gut that it was a worthwhile endeavor. Maybe it's a new milestone in his career. Maybe he could make the most of it. All right, said the older man after a moment's thought. I generally approve, but I don't support it. Act at your own risk, and if anything, forget about me. But if everything works out, I'll be the first to see this movie. You got it? Yeah, Billy answered. You and me were signed. Don't you refresh my memory here? The older man said threateningly. That's what you all say. Signed, signed. And then clean up your shit for you. When you make a movie, call me back. You do realize that it must be 10. I'm not going to accept a shoddy movie. I won't thank you for a week stretch. It's got to be real. It's got to be real. It's got to be real. Heartfelt, you know. I understand, Billy said, and smiled. He was already anticipating that his new movie would stir up the whole shadow side. I've been waiting a long time for this chance, by the way. Oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you. I'm working tomorrow night. In the evening, the older man was surprised. I support, but from now on, do not hurry. Don't start such things without my approval. Tonight, honey? Tonight, honey? Can you make it? Go ahead, flag in your hand. All right. That's it. Billy wanted to discuss other matters, now that he'd had a chance to get access to the Celestial. But it was forbidden to argue with him. The fact that he'd gotten an agreement for tomorrow's deal gave him strength and determination. However, he had kept something from the Elder, and if he knew what it was, he might consider it a betrayal. Julia was thrilled that she would have to tell her ungrateful stepdaughter of the humiliation that awaited her. To think that tomorrow night she would be an adult, and she'll remember this day for a long time, or rather forever. Once upon a time, a long time ago, Julia was abused the same way. No, even worse, because they were not foreign men, but her own relatives. And nothing. She grew up a human being, a solid and intelligent woman. She built her own house, or rather inherited it. Julia thought with rapture how Angelica would suffer, and it was a sweet feeling. All right, wench, Julia said, calling her stepdaughter over. You can use my bathroom now. You know, the one on this floor. Really? Angelica was surprised. It seemed such a small thing and so much delight. It's not for nothing, Julia continued. Tomorrow night I want a clean wash. Take my razor. If there's any hair under your underwear, clean it all up. Take the blush, mascara, brushes from my locker, and put on your makeup, and put on your best dress. For a moment, Angelique thought it was a joke. Hateful stepmother not only asks to dress up nicely, but also to tidy up. Maybe she had decided to let her go into adulthood after all. Angelica brightened up. How do I talk to my stepmother to change her mind? She pondered. Decided she had to be careful. Whatever you say, Aunt Julia, Angelica replied. Only, what's the best dress? I've only got one, the blue one. Whatever the stepmother said, but nature had given her stepdaughter a perfect figure. Her body proportions were perfect. Angelica often felt that boys were looking at her. Such attention embarrassed and even frightened her. The girl had to clean the whole big house and hostel, carry heavy buckets of water from here. She had broad shoulders and taut hips. She'd worn her prom dress after 9th grade just recently. How was graduation? She just got her diploma and went home. She had to pay 3,000 rubles to go to a concert and then to a cafe. She really wanted to have fun with everyone, and she begged her landlady for money. Of course, her stepmother refused her request. Blue. And take it, Julia smiled, and the expression on her face frightened the girl. It won't last long anyway. What do you mean, not for long? Angelica was surprised, sensing something bad. They'll take it off you, girl, explained the stepmother. Together with your underwear. 3 suitors are coming to see you tomorrow night. To marry, then. She burst into a gloating laugh that gave the girl goosebumps. Angelica looked at Julia, and in that moment she resembled a witch. Her age was far from old, though only 40 years old. She was from a small town, and she occasionally used foreign words in her speech. I don't understand anything, the girl exhaled. What do you mean they will take off the dress? What will they do with me? A terrible guess immediately flashed through her mind. She had read of such things. Did her stepmother want to hand her over to the men she called fiancés? No, she must be joking. No living soul would think of such an elaborate torture for a loved one. But how? They're going to hurt me. I'm just a little girl. It will be all right, added the stepmother, in an unexpectedly calm voice. You'll sit with them and read your poems to them. Maybe sing a song, pet them where they ask. And they'll pet you too. They won't do anything to you. They won't do anything to you that you don't want them to. But Mama, the girl screamed. Julia answered with a powerful slap. She knew how to hit without leaving a mark, a real talent. Evan had once said that his woman had studied to be a doctor, but had dropped out of university in her 4th year. Apparently, at least one skill came in handy. How many times have I told you? The stepmother roared. I'm not your mother. Your mother left you with your father. You hear me. If you behave, we'll rent you out a couple times a week. You're useless anyway. All you do is eat and drink, but you're useless. And if you behave badly, I'll sell you 5 times a night. Do you hear? But, whispered Angelica, rubbing her bruised cheek, I have not once, do you hear? I've never done it. You know, like this, not with anyone. And then she blushed so hard she was literally crimson. She'd never discussed such matters with her stepmother. In fact, she'd never discussed it with anyone. Are you going to tell me that you're still a girl? Shouted the stepmother, looking at her hated stepdaughter, and grabbed her by the breasts. Tell me, I can see from you. You're a warring sheep, just like your mother. I bet the whole neighborhood's been dragging you around. Don't tell me it ain't so. So starting tomorrow, we'll charge you for it. Big money. If you're not prepared, I'll kill you. I'll throw it in the trash. You're free to go. With these words, Julia pushed her out the door to the dark staircase leading to the basement. The girl squirmed and couldn't believe what was happening. Angelica sobbed with pain, humiliation, and fear. Is it all happening to her for real? Would no one come and help her? Would no one protect her? While Julia, rubbing her hands together, prepared her stepdaughter for her first-ever clients, Billy gathered his companions to discuss the details of the upcoming meeting. Archie and Harvey were not so much close friends as colleagues in their shady dealings. The men who had been privy to all the twists and turns of his fate furrowed their brow. On the one hand, their comrade's proposal was very interesting to them. On the other hand, they preferred to look at things soberly. 16, you say? Archie asked sarcastically. What a thing. You've certainly got a lot of nerve signing up, and you signed us. Did you think about the prosecutor? You're the only one who's got it all figured out, Harvey added. I always do. Well done, our leader. And what are you going to do if at some point in our meeting something goes wrong? If you don't feel sorry for yourself, have you thought about us? Okay, shut up, both of you, Billy demanded, losing patience. If you're going to give me any more snot, I'm going to fix each of you speech impediments. You didn't get it to whine. I saw the big man today. Yeah, the big man. He approves. And he spoke well of you, too. He said you won't let us down. If not us, someone else will buy it. And then you'll bite your elbows. When they heard about the senior, the comrades immediately bit their tongues. There's a strict hierarchy in their business. They would not want to check what happens if it is broken. They wouldn't like the answer. The fact that Billy has access to a Celestial, the guys immediately felt respect. And fear. Yeah, Archie agreed. Sure, they'll buy him out easy. It's Washington. But man, tomorrow. Can we get the money together in time? No, Billy agreed. But he smiled slyly. But they ain't gonna know that. We'll throw the doll at them. The main thing for us is to get our paws on the girl, to make our movie, and that's it. So you've decided to take a risk, Harvey asked. You're a risky one. What are we going to do if there are more than 2 of them? What if this procuress has some trump card up her sleeve? Nobody's going to be there. Billy waved his hand. All right. Listen up, you little brats. Either you come with me all the way to the end, and we all 3 of us rise to the top, thanks to our 16-year-old hottie, or I don't want to know you, and I'll tell my eldest. Who's going to write the movie? Harvey sighed. This honorable duty has already been given to him once. While some of them were working in the frame, having a good time, he had to organize the plot, exposition, images. He had to make sure there were no mistakes on the tape. Okay, I'm ready to write, Harvey said. But on one condition, and let's make a deal. You listen to the end without interrupting. Be realistic, Sarge. Until tomorrow night, you will not find a second cameraman. Billy listened to him. The suggestion seemed reasonable. He smiled and patted his comrade on the shoulder. I didn't realize you were such a strategist. But I saw it coming, and I've got it all ready. Can you imagine? Here, take a look. He pulled a package out from under his drawer and tossed it toward Billy. He opened the folders, thumbed through them, and smacked his lips as he familiarized himself with their contents. He handed it to Harvey, who was quick to express his admiration. The work did inspire respect. Listen, how do you live here? Harvey asked, looking around the room. Not even a window. I'd hang myself. The tobacco smoke and artificial light made his eyes hurt. Harvey had been in detention centers before, and the room was eerily reminiscent of a detention room in a prison. The only difference was that the furniture was not bolted to the floor. If, of course, you could call furniture 3 drawers, an old table, and a shabby shelving unit. You don't understand, Billy said, and clapped him on the shoulder. You got to get closer to our people. Closer. What about your beggars? Archie asked, still sitting around. Sure they are, Billy smiled. Have you finished reading your daddies? Give them to me. Get ready for tomorrow, all right, and bring your guns. Bring your guns. Archie was surprised. Are we going to do this ourselves? Yeah, Billy nodded. Power over his comrades made his head spin. Hide the lances where no one will see them for a while. Not even me. We don't have to unholster them till morning anyway. It'll be such a movie, they'll give us a Nobel for it. If we survive, of course. Archie and Harvey sighed. They suspected, of course, that their comrade was too brave. But taking a gun with them was a huge risk. Too big. However, with wolves howling at wolves, so they did not dare to express doubts or dissatisfaction. Angelica sat in her dark room, wrapped in a blanket. At the end of April, it had already warmed up outside, and her stepmother had turned off the gas boiler. That meant Angelica's casemates, where she spent so much time, would be damp again. In winter, at least, she had heat from the radiators. Dad had designed this house himself and put a large radiator in the basement floor. Her mattress, which he called a bed, lay beside it. It was as if Dad knew his daughter would have to live in the basement. Now Angelica was trying to figure out what she should do. School was over. Of course, she had told the social pedagogue before that all was not well in the family. She had described all her misfortunes in her diaries, and had described all her misfortunes in her diaries, and had tossed them to Julianne several times. But she just returned the notebooks, complaining about the girl's forgetfulness. You left your notes with me again, she said. You need to pull yourself together. You have such an important period ahead of you. Julianne. Why do you call her that? Julianne wondered. She's your mom. The social pedagogue called the foster parents to the school to dispel their doubts. She had a feeling that the girl simply missed her biological mom and dad, hence her attitude toward Juliana and Evan. The wise woman trusted Julia unconditionally. A few conversations convinced the school official that Angelica was perfectly safe. Since then, she's been mentoring the girl ever since. You should be grateful to this heroic woman, Julianne said. If it weren't for her, you would have been put in an orphanage. And there, you know, life is not sugar. Besides, let's both admit it, stepmother owes you nothing, but she spends her time feeding you, clothing you. It's a real feat, as if she's giving part of her life to you. Appreciate it. Alas, the school teachers could not be reached. Now Angelica wondered, what would this woman say if she told her about her foster mother's plans? Would she have convinced her that all professions are necessary and important? In her head, the girl imagined the woman's voice. Look at the situation from the other side, Angelica. You've only just turned 16 and you'll already have a job. A high-paying one, by the way, unlike mine. But school is already over. Recently, Angelica was given her certificate, and now the building is closed for the summer. What to do? Not far away was a church. Aunt Julia and Uncle Vanya went there every week, did not miss any religious holiday, and always took the girl with them. There was a charming bishop with a beautiful voice, Father Sam. He seemed to understand Angelica's predicament, and in the moments of their rare conversations he reminded her of love and forgiveness. Everyone has their own destiny, he said. God took your mom and dad away from you and gave you Julia and Evan instead. This is God's plan, which we cannot comprehend. We just have to accept God's will and do the best we can. What if, the girl asked, what if someone else puts their cross on you? Cleaning, washing, laundry. Oh, my child, you have to grow up and gain experience, answered Father Sam. It is sometimes difficult for children, even modern children, to realize the actions of adults. Domestic duties are a sacred duty for children. It's wonderful that your foster parents are teaching you to work. Julia sighed. She wanted to tell the priest that she also had to clean the hostel, to put up with her stepmother's abuse, and to put up with Uncle Evan looking at her. But she was ashamed to talk about such things. For some reason, she felt she was to blame for all her troubles. I am unhappy in this family, Father, Angelica said, which made the priest chuckle. Not Father, but Father, he corrected her. If it's difficult for you, you can always come to us. We will comfort you and help you. One day, Angelica wanted to take her advice. It's not hard to guess that Julia forbade her to do so. And now, thinking about saving herself from her stepmother's insidious plans, the girl remembered about the church. What if Father Sam could help? She quickly packed and sneaked out of the house. She took a backpack with her where she put the things she needed for the first time. Underwear, a towel, a bag of bread, and also a cell phone and a charger. The church in their village had appeared a few years ago. It was a beautiful and neat building with a high dome and a bell tower. Father Sam's car stood near the entrance to the temple of God, which means that he is still there. The girl rushed inside. The priest was cleaning. He considered fasting and physical labor as the main prayer. Now he took water in a huge bucket and scrubbed the floors on his knees. When he saw Angelica, he smiled. "Good evening, my daughter. Thank you for visiting me." "Hello," Angelica whispered and stared at the priest. "May I help you?" "No," the priest refused. "I'm almost finished. Wait a bit, my child. I'll pour out the dirty water, and I'll be right back to you." There was an awkward silence. Father Sam smiled and continued his work. The man had strong hands. He twisted the rag so that there was not a drop of water left in it. Of course, such a job could be entrusted to voluntary helpers, which are available at any temple. But Father Sam preferred to do all the labor himself. "Would you like to have some tea?" he asked the girl when he had finished cleaning. Angelica continued to stand awkwardly, shuffling from foot to foot. "Yes," she answered. "I want to." He took her into the back room, the door leading directly from the vestibule. There was a small table in the room, and on it some food. Father Sam boiled a kettle and took some scones out of the bag. Sitting down in a chair, Angelica took a sip of the drink and felt almost good. It wasn't often she found support from people she didn't know very well. The priest, on the other hand, felt out of place. It is not proper for young maidens to walk alone like this, he thought, especially in the evening with their heads uncovered. He hoped that after tea Angelique would tell him what had happened. But the girl persisted in her silence. Looking at this beautiful young girl, sinful thoughts could well appear. The priest, tired of the silence, decided to start talking first. "What brings you to God's house, child?" he asked, smiling amiably. "You said that if I would be bad." The girl stretched out. "If something threatened me, I could ask for help." "Of course," replied Father Sam. "God is all-powerful. He will help not only you, but everyone who suffers. Tell me what happened. We will read a prayer together, and the solution will surely appear." "You see," the girl began, "evil people want to make me bad and hurt me. Evil people want to. They want to sell me." And she began to sobbing. The priest immediately jumped up. It can't be. He had heard of such things before. Alas, Washington was steeped in vice. Could something like this be happening in his parish? Action had to be taken. These young maidens who know no sorrows are capable of doing rash things. She must have been mixed up with some villain who had turned her head, and now she wanted out. "Julia," he turned to her. "Tell me what happened." "It hasn't begun yet," the girl replied, and blushed thickly again. "But it will start tomorrow. These people have already told me. They have announced their plans, so to speak." The priest thought it was necessary to act immediately. This child must have been too shy to tell her parents. Of course he must help her, but first he must tell her guardians, so that he doesn't have to make excuses for his actions. "Yes, my daughter. You've come to the right place. I'm sure we can work together to solve this problem. Why don't you stay here, have some more tea and some scones? I'll be back in a minute just to make the call," Father Sam said, and went out the door. He was a modern bishop. For example, he had his own group for the congregation on Skype. And there he easily found Julia. She was an active parishioner and never missed a religious holiday. He pressed the call button. But he did not know that the girl uses a number registered to her foster mother. She had recently changed the number, giving the girl the old phone with the SIM card. At that time, Angelica saw a call, though from an unfamiliar number. She picked up the phone. "Good evening," she heard the voice of Father Sam. "Julia, it's your local priest. The thing is that your daughter is asking me for help. She's going to stay here for a while. Okay, Julia?" There was silence on the other end of the line. The priest looked at the phone. The connection was broken. Julia's stepmother didn't want to hear it and hung up. The priest decided to talk to the evening guest one more time. But when he went back into the back room, the girl was already gone. Father Sam sighed and crossed himself. Before he'd met Julia, Evan had been a quiet alcoholic. The kind that caused the most trouble for himself. He was always looking for part-time work, but he never lasted long. As long as his father and mother were alive, they were the ones who kept him from hitting rock bottom. They fed him, clothed him, helped him cope with headaches after heavy drinking. And when his parents died, their old-fashioned apartment with high ceilings suddenly fell on his head. He found himself the sole heir to a 3-bedroom. Until then, Evan hadn't even considered how much their real estate was worth. But when he found out, he was surprised and delighted. At that moment, he was already over 40, and the only entertainment in his life was partying with acquaintances and strangers. And the more guests there were, the more the apartment deteriorated. Along with the coziness, his parents' belongings, appliances, and furniture were gone. When Evan got sober, he always thought he'd quit for good, sell the place, move to the country and live off the difference, grow vegetables, walk in the woods. But then the apartment door would open, another guest would appear on the doorstep, and everything would move in a circle. At what point Julia appeared beside him, he didn't remember. Someone must have introduced them. The woman had been a real ray of light for him. She took him in and strictly forbade him to drink alcohol. She helped him pay off debts that had been piling up for years. With noisy companies was over. Now the old house, after a small repair, received tenants. All these issues were solved by the wife, and he became his wife's assistant and confidant. He had to collect money from the inhabitants of the hostel, buy food, constantly repair and change something. And the crowd in the hostel was specific. Mostly workers of local construction sites and newcomers who didn't have enough money for a normal place to live. 20 beds, which were rarely empty, had seen a lot. A decent household where everything had to be taken care of. With his calloused hand, Evan kept a detailed ledger of who paid what for the night's lodging. That evening, he decided to go around the debtors, but encountered unexpected aggression. "Hey, you old man," said one of the workers angrily, blocking his way. "What kind of pigsty is this? What am I paying money for, huh?" Evan walked into the common kitchen and was stunned. The trash can look like it hadn't been emptied all day. The table, the floor, and the sink was so dirty, it was disgusting to look at. Someone had walked in boots that had not been cleaned, leaving footprints on the floor. The refrigerator emitted a disgusting odor. Angelica hadn't thrown out the expired food. Yeah, Evan agreed. A little dirty, but you're not staying at the Washington Hotel. What am I paying money for? The worker was indignant. Do I have to mop the floors? Let's say you'll mop the floors, replied the boss. You're shouting here, clucking and clucking. Oh yeah, the guest roared. I'm leaving this pigsty, and I won't pay back my debts. You haven't been to the toilet yet, shouted another guest. You can go crazy stinking in there. What kind of high-security hostel is this, huh? Shut up, Evan told him. If you don't like it, go outside. It's June already. It's warm. You can sleep in the field. There was a murmur in the common kitchen, and the most unpleasant insults were hurled in his direction. Looking at the angry tenants, Evan thought it best to retreat, especially since the complaints were justified. Their lodging house had always been known for its cleanliness. Julia knew what she was doing. She cleaned the rooms, the kitchen, and even the toilet, which the tenants treated without any reverence. We'll be right there, Evan threw to the tenants. We'll clean everything properly. Go take a break, have a smoke. We'll find our cleaning lady, and she'll clean it up in no time. We'll get your cleaning lady, shouted the worker who started the riot. But Evan had already shut the door, so he didn't hear what the guest was going to do to the poor girl. We had to hurry. Julia had given him an assignment to go to the supermarket for groceries, and he had a long list of groceries in his pocket. That meant he had to hurry to get everything done on time or his wife would be angry. After Evan finally stopped drinking, Julia often gave him a car. Not yet old and strong Toyota. It was a great car. Just what he needed to live in the country. Evan reluctantly made his way down to the basement, where there was a steep staircase he was afraid of. What if his foot twisted and he flew down? When he became Julia's husband, the girl was already living in the basement. He didn't get involved in the family's relations. Besides, the new wife treated Julia with disdain, and Evan had to play the same game. "Where are you, girl?" he asked, coming down to the basement. The answer was silence. In the darkness, he was suddenly afraid. He remembered the eyes of the woman, the same one he and Julia had seen a few months ago. And it seemed to him that from the darkness the victim was looking at him, staring at him with a mute question. Why? Evan began to fumble with the wall in terror. He found a light switch, pressed it, and a dim light appeared in the basement. He exhaled. No one. He who had descended to the bottom of life was used to squalor, and yet the conditions of Julia's stepdaughter's existence were bestial. The mattress lay directly on the floor. Next to it stood a coat rack, on which both a winter jacket, jeans, and a dress. Instead of a desk, there was a roughly chipped construction made of boards, and instead of a chair, a crate. The windows are just below the ceiling. Hardly much light gets through here, even with the sun shining outside. But most importantly, it's damp and cold. Both walls and ceiling are concrete, roughly painted. Evan was scared again. He felt as if he were in an unmarked grave. The same one he dumped the woman in at Julia's request. Holy God, Evan whispered, and crossed himself unskillfully. The man had never been curious, but when he saw the girl's notebook, he couldn't resist the temptation to peek into it. He liked Julia purely in appearance, and he always wanted to know what was in her mind. Many pages were written in beautiful handwriting. He didn't like to read, so he just flipped through the diary, smiling. But when he reached the end, he opened his mouth in surprise. He rushed upstairs, but then came back down and turned off the light. His wife was demanding that he save electricity. "We've got a problem here, that one," Evan said. He held out Julia's diary to Julia, and the woman's eyes filled with rage. Angelica had lived her entire small life in the suburbs of the huge Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, but had hardly ever made it out to the capital itself. It used to be, as a child, that her father often took her to the city and showed her the beautiful places. Once Dad took her to the skyscraper Washington City. There they ate hot dogs, went up to the observation deck, admired the picturesque surroundings. From a bird's-eye view, the capital is huge. Was it really with her, or just a dream? The last 7 years Angelica, if not counting school, spent in the basement of her father's house. And in fact, in the basement, her father had chosen a great location for his cottage. Nearby was a forest and a small lake, but at the same time it was easy to get to the capital. The house itself is simple, without frills, but beautiful. Right next to the village is a railroad station. Angelica had no idea who her father was, what he did. He died when she was too young to figure it out. However, according to her foster mother, her father's only occupation was borrowing money. The very money she had to pay back. Dad was probably a builder or architect, because as a child he often told her about different buildings and drew all the time. He had several laptops that he used to work on all the time, but after her father died, her stepmother sold them. Allegedly for lack of use. "How do they not fall down, Daddy?" she asked about the skyscrapers of Washington City when they got home. "They have a strong foundation," he explained. "It's a support." And he'd draw in the sand, explaining how these marvels worked. She couldn't understand the intricacies of construction with her childish mind, but she loved to hear her father's voice. What would he say if he found out that her stepmother was going to sell her to some men? Probably die again, this time of shame. She took the train for nothing, a hair. The passage to the station was blocked by a turnstile, which the girl simply swung over. When she got into the carriage, she fell asleep almost immediately. It was nice and beautiful here. Soft seats, warm, cozy. There weren't many people in the evening railroad car. She didn't even know that there were such beautiful and comfortable trains to Washington now. The last time they'd gone to a museum in the capital as a class, they'd had to jolt around in the old car. Angelica closed her eyes and dreamed that she was with her father again. She complained to him about her life, and he listened patiently and nodded and smiles. "Daddy, why did you leave me?" the girl asked. "It happened," he answered, shrugging his shoulders. "Daddy, I feel very bad about Aunt Julia," Angelica said. "She wants to hurt me, humiliate and trample me. Can you imagine?" He said nothing in reply, but the smile was gone from his face. Then suddenly he took her by the shoulders. She thought Daddy wanted to hug her, but for some reason he started shaking her. He shook her hard like he wanted to wake her up. "Girl, wake up," the woman in the blue uniform said. "It's the end of the line." "All right, let's get off." "Oh, where am I?" Angelica asked. She couldn't understand where she was or where her father had disappeared to. "In Washington, my dear," smiled the employee. "As they say, the electric train doesn't go any further." Angelica got off at the big train station. There were so many people here that she felt tiny against them. They were coming in huge streams like waves. Her plan had one flaw. She didn't know what to do next. The most likely thing to do was to run. Go to the very college where she'd been accepted. She remembered the city of Houston perfectly, and the name. The girl walked over to the large information board. There must be trains to Houston, but how to choose the right one? She had never traveled alone. It was already 11 p.m. On the clock, the phone was almost dead. Finally, Angelica guessed to ask the info center. "Tell me, please," she addressed the woman. "How is it possible to go to Houston?" "It's late today, dear," the employee replied, toppling over to the computer. "There's a train tomorrow morning at 6:18. Do you live there? Will you buy a ticket?" Angelica did not answer and left. What should she do? Where should she go? She could just wander the streets and go back to the train station in the morning, and go to the college, but classes would not start until September, Angelica thought with horror. And now it's June. What to do? Then she calmed down a little, because there must be a lot of work at the college. And she'd be given something to do too. She can clean floors, windows, even toilets. She'll do anything to avoid going back to her stepmother's house. The girl stepped outside and moved forward. When she ran away from home, she had completely forgotten about warm clothes. Do you think about that on a June evening? In principle, if the wind wasn't blowing, it was bearable. But it was the wind that made her cold. The girl thought she'd find some entrance where she could wait until morning. Then it would dawn, the sun would come out, and it would be warm again. She wandered through the very streets where she had once walked with her father. Washington is a beautiful city. Angelica thought that the capital is a whole world created by man, and this world lives by its own laws. There are a lot of good people here, but there are a lot of bad people here. But there are also a lot of bad people. Sometimes they act as if Washington belonged to them. Angelica thought that she had to find the good ones, and then everything would get better. A patrol was walking down the street. A lieutenant and with him 2 sergeants. They looked at the girl who was walking to meet them. She was obviously dressed for the weather. It was cold, and she was wearing a light t-shirt and jeans. The girl was shivering from the cold. In principle, he could have passed by. Nowadays, people look so old that you can't tell how old they are. Girl, the lieutenant called her. Good evening. The lieutenant looked at the child. She's pretty, but she's not well groomed, and dressed as if she'd picked up her clothes on the street. Still, she has a deep look in her eyes. Do you have any ID? The policeman asked. Are you going home? Angelica was frightened at first. She had never imagined that someone could call out and stop her on the streets of Washington at night. But then she calmed down. They were cops, after all, policemen. Who, if not them, should protect her? Please help me, the girl asked, pulling her passport out of her bag and holding it out to the policeman. I'm not from here. Can I help you? No problem, the policeman replied and frowned. There are problems, Angelica started to argue and immediately cried. I have big problems. You just don't worry, the man said, approaching her from the side and taking her under his elbow. Now we'll go to our place, and I'll take you to our... He stopped, choosing the words so as not to frighten the child more, to our house. There you'll come to your senses. Rest, and then we'll decide what to do next. What happened? There was no arrogance in his voice, but there was a firmness in it that made me believe. It was as if the tears had dried themselves and the girl felt more confident. Was her misfortune really over? I don't know where to begin. Angelica exhaled and prepared to tell the whole truth. After reading the diary, Julia's hair stood on her head. Okay, the girl described their difficult relationship, and quarrels are the small things of life. But that old blonde who had supposedly sold her apartment to Julia before she died, sweat broke out on her forehead. The girl's got a talent for writing. Aunt Julia is a duplicitous and secretive woman. She always acts like a saint to strangers. She only shows her real face to me and Uncle Evan. Last night they brought some woman into the house, a blonde. I saw and heard them sitting in the kitchen discussing something. It got very cold in the kitchen discussing something. I got very cold in the basement, and I slowly crept out into the hallway to keep warm, hiding behind my things. At some point I heard Uncle Evan arguing with Julia. Their guest was silent at the time, probably asleep. I dozed off too, and I was awakened by the banging on the door. I looked out of my hiding place and saw my uncle carrying a large sack. I guessed he was carrying the blonde girl. I almost died of fright. Both Julia and her husband sat in silence. To think their house next door to the hostel is always full of people, some coming in, others going out. They could not think that what happened in the light room could attract someone's attention. If the girl tells anyone, the cops will have no problem putting 2 and 2 together. Did you bury her well? The woman asked sternly. Yeah, Evan answered. I forgot, so don't ask. Why didn't you check on your stepdaughter? Julia whispered. Didn't you say so? The man was indignant. He was well aware that they had an unwanted witness. You're the head. You think of everything and decide everything. What about me? Just sitting on the edge. You think she's going to tell on us? Julia jumped up and paced the kitchen. Her face was flushed. The woman started rubbing her temples, trying to figure out what to do next. Furious, she looked at Evan. It was him. It was all his fault. He couldn't keep an eye on the girl. Looking at him, the landlady shouted, "Have you forgotten the abyss from which I pulled you? You ungrateful creature. You owe me your life. Do you understand?" With these words, Julia slapped him hard. Evan got stars in his eyes and his cheek burned with fire. But pain was nothing. The fact that Julia was angry scared him for real. The man rubbed the bruised spot and thought about how he could get his wife back in his good graces. After all, she was the only thing he had in his life. "Julia, what's my fault?" he asked in a pleading voice. "You didn't tell me to follow her. I wasn't. Couldn't you have guessed it yourself?" the woman shouted. "Do you realize that not only could we be missing out on $1 million, but we could be sitting down for a long time? In your case, forever?" Even rubbed the back of his head. "So, there's still a deal to be made with the man in black. Give him back the 20 grand, apologize, and explain that Angelica had escaped. But what about the cops?" He remembered exactly where he buried the blonde. And he understood why Julia had told him to kill her. If they questioned him, would he be able to stand it? Run was written on the last page of the diary. Julia tore it out and tore it into small pieces. "We should look for her," the wife said. "It's urgent. She's got no money, probably wandering around the village. Come on, get ready." They got into a tall Toyota and started driving around the neighborhood, asking people if they'd seen the girl. But where she could be, in the woods by the river near the store, they didn't find her, as if she had vanished through the ground. However, Angelica could have gotten to Washington. Julia dialed the girl's own old number, but the machine was turned off. After several hours of searching, they had to stop at a gas station, ran out of gas. There the woman bought 2 glasses of coffee. She needed to cheer up. She was desperately trying to figure out what to do next. Should she cover her tracks? Get rid of that useless Evan. She'd already signed over his apartment to herself anyway. The woman preferred to play out any death in a way that made it look natural. It was time-consuming, but it made it easier to cover her tracks. "Evan," Julia said, "why don't you use your brain and think about where she might have gone? You've had better contact with her than I have." The man was silent. Instead of fear, a sense of numbness came over him. He was tired. He wanted to sleep badly. After all, it was his wife's fault. Why would she want to sell her niece? I mean, rent her out. If that hadn't happened, they would have continued to live on and on. Suddenly, the phone rang. The display showed an unfamiliar number. "Hello?" Julia said into the receiver. She tried to keep her voice calm. "Good night," the man said firmly. "This is Lieutenant Krivov, Moscow Police. I'm afraid you'll have to come to us, to the Central District office right away. Where are you?" Julia's face twisted with fear. Wasn't this girl as stupid as she thought she was? Angelica had heard all sorts of horror stories about the police. She knew it was the place where it was best not to go. But when she got to the police station, she was pleasantly surprised. The lieutenant led her into the office, sat her on the couch, and offered her a glass of hot tea. She needed time to gather her thoughts. "Well, what happened?" the lieutenant asked. He was new to the police force, and he liked to do good deeds. Now he was thinking that he had saved the girl. She could have been taken by people with bad intentions, not by the cops. "It's my stepmother," Angelica began. "You know, it's ringing." "Excuse me a minute," the lieutenant said. He grabbed the phone and started reporting something. The policeman even stretched out as if he were standing in front of a big boss. That's right. The area's been worked out. No, we haven't detected anything." "No way." "Yes, Comrade Lieutenant Colonel." The lieutenant hung up. "So, where were they?" "I'm sorry." "Julia, speak please, I'm listening attentively. Police work is not what he imagined it would be. The biggest frustration was the constant paperwork. You had to have a document for every comment, and the more you had, the better your chances of proving your case. You see, my stepmother is a scary person, Angelique said. Very scary. At that very moment, the lieutenant was distracted again. Face search. What if the girl was wanted? What if her parents were already looking for her? He had entered his guest's data in the database, so he was distracted. He could hear what she was saying, but he couldn't understand the words. So, an orphan. 16 years old. He had no trouble finding his stepmother's phone number in the database. She was listed here as a mother. Adoption proceedings. Do you live here? The policeman asked, turning the monitor and showing the address. The girl nodded. This was not his neighborhood, and not Washington, D.C. at all. Yes, you can't put it in any index. The girl was alive and well with parents, albeit foster parents. What's her status? She's not in custody. If the inspectors come, he could be in trouble. Though the chances of that were slim, but Julia kept saying something, but he couldn't hear her at all. He just nodded. So, said the policeman when the guest was silent. Help, Julia said timidly. He came on duty at 8 in the morning, and it was already 12 o'clock at night. Rubbing his temples, he tried to collect his thoughts. So this charming young girl had a falling out with her stepmother. No surprise there. It's only in fairy tales that strangers live soul to soul. What should he do? The idea came out of the blue. If the stepmother is really that bad, there's no way in hell she'll follow her stepdaughter to the police at night. And if... The lieutenant looked at the girl with a smile. Look, darling, he said. I really want to help you. It's late. You can sit here on the couch, even take a nap. I'll take care of your business. Okay? Angelica nodded. She was really tired, so she wouldn't mind resting. Besides, her phone was dead. The lieutenant dialed the numbers from the monitor, went out into the corridor, and when the receiver was picked up, he spoke in his own voice. Billy was finalizing the last of his preparations. He had made the most detailed inquiries about the future victim's family and was pleasantly surprised. Yes, there was a lot more to be gained here than he had realized at first glance. It seems this woman with the rare name of Julia will give them much more than their own daughter. It's a gold mine. Billy even cleaned himself up for the cause. He shaved and cut his hair, put on a clean t-shirt. He scrutinized himself in the mirror. After all, he must look good on the video. He had nothing to be embarrassed about, and nothing to be embarrassed about, and nothing to hide. Let anyone who wanted to watch. Soon, literally tonight, he's going to take it to the next level, and will reach such heights that detractors will be forced to shut their mouths. Angelica couldn't believe that this was really happening to her. She fell asleep with a feeling of warmth and security. The policeman had really helped her. And when she woke up, the same lieutenant was handing her over to her stepmother to be tortured. Julia was looking at her with a completely different gaze. Julia felt a clammy fear. Thank you, the woman smiled. Well, let's go. You know the little child, she needs to sleep at home. Not on other people's sofas. Well, my dear, did you want to run away? Why would you do that? We love you very much. Aunt Julia, Angelica sobbed. Please forgive me. Why are you so Aunt? Aunt, the woman shook her hands. How many times I told you? Call me Mom. Don't be afraid of anything. Let's go. The stepmother dragged her stepdaughter out into the hallway. Julia put her hand on the girl's shoulder as they made their way out. From the outside, it might have looked like a caring mother hugging her child. In fact, the stepmother's sharp nails dug painfully into her skin. Now she didn't even care about the marks on the girl's skin. Angelica wrinkled her nose, but walked on. She walked doomed as if she were walking to the scaffold. Even continued to stare at the door of the police station. Julia hadn't been gone long at all, about 15 minutes, no more. But that time seemed like an eternity to the man. Finally, the door opened and his wife and stepdaughter appeared on the doorstep. Evan couldn't believe his eyes. As soon as the girl got into the car, the man immediately raised his fist to punch her. Julia had almost thrown him out of the house for this fugitive, but his wife intercepted him. "You'll spoil the goods," she said. "Remember, she has a special day tomorrow." "So, what do we do?" Evan asked. "Won't she give us more trouble, just like we agreed?" Julia smiled. "We'll just ask the grooms to make sure that they don't deny themselves anything. They'll teach her a lesson, won't they, you rascal?" Angelica's eyes filled with tears. Was there no one in the world who could help her? While she was gathering her strength to tell the police about her stepmother's insidious plans, she arrived. So the policeman put her in the hands of her tormentors. At the realization of this terrible truth, Angelica's strength finally left her. She broke down. "Aunt Julia, don't beat me and lock me up," she said. "I'll do as you say. I won't let you down again. I promise." Julia's organizational talents were once again on full display. In just a few morning hours, she had found a cleaner for the hostel and she had managed to clean it up. An old woman from their village had been asking for a job for a long time, but she had been turned down. Julia's basement was now a prison. Together with Evan, the girl moved there a large bed and mattress. It took the man an hour to pack it up, grumbling unhappily. "Here, screwed up." "What do you mean? Where to?" Julia installed neon lights in the basement. As if torn from her heart, she bought them for herself. Thanks to them, the room was filled with a pleasant neon light. It hid the shabby walls and ceiling. The woman reasoned that now her stepdaughter did not need to go upstairs. She'd take her clients right here. Evan would bring her food. Julia stared blankly at the scene. She didn't seem to fully understand her plight. "It's your own fault," Julia said. "How can I let you go anywhere now? You've set me up and you've really let me down. So you're going to work right here." Julia was silent. She was completely depressed. It was as if the girl had accepted her fate. Julia calculated how much she could earn if there was not one such obedient girl in the basement, but 3 at once. Or better yet, 5. It's a gold mine. And no need, as they say, do not need to get their hands dirty. If someone had asked her why she needed so much money, she wouldn't have been able to answer. Upstairs in the bedroom, Julia had her own stash. It contained no less than $40 million. The money was hidden securely in the floor and would not be easy to get to. The woman trusted neither banks nor investment funds. She just sat on the money, feeling happy every time the amount was added. Her thoughts were interrupted by the doorbell. Come in, guests," Julia smiled. She scrutinized the 3 men. Yes, what a sight they looked like. They didn't look like anything special but the looks. They were fierce. It was clear who was in charge, the one in the center. "Good evening, Mother," said Billy in his smoky voice. "Well, where's the lovely one?" "Over there." Julia smiled and pointed to the door leading to the basement. As they say, waiting in a specially equipped room. "You can have a good time there. We won't get in the way. Even if she screams, yells. Well, why the long talk?" "Here you go, Mother," Billy said, handing her some bills. "What's this?" Julia was indignant, looking at the amount, which was clearly under $1 million. "Where's the rest?" "The rest in the morning." Billy smiled, showing her several thick wads, which he promptly tucked away in an inside pocket. "Here's the money. We'll pay you when it's paid for. And if you don't agree, we can take your girl for free. And not for rent, but forever." The rest of the V's immediately surrounded her. Archie took Julia by the elbow, and the woman was truly frightened. "Think about it," he said. "You're telling us the goods are first rate, never been seen before. And what if it's not? You don't think that we, honest people, will cheat? Then check it," Julia shouted. She hadn't thought of such a scenario. "Check it now." No, Billy shook his head. We need to prepare. Tune in. Come back in the morning, not alone, but with Evan. We'll give you a little more if you behave. Don't bother us till morning, Mother. Julia clutched the bills in her hand. 50,000. On the one hand, she felt cheated. Julia had directly seen men give her $1 million and then abuse her stepdaughter. And here she was, a few bills and be good. On the other hand, you can't live with the wolves. They'd pay her back in the morning. She could feel it in her heart. Moreover, their chief had shown her a bunch of bills. On the other hand, even if they didn't pay her, they would punish the girl properly. After a sleepless night, she wanted to rest. She and her husband went up to the second floor. The thick ceilings would hide any sounds. They couldn't hear their stepdaughter's screams from here. Listen, Julia, Evan asked. Why did you... That. 3. You're a fool, Vanya, answered Julia. After they've fucked her, she'll be silky smooth. And when we bring her men one by one, she won't even dare to make a peep. It's not right, Julia. It's not right, Evan exhaled. You traitor! The woman was outraged. Is it right to sit on my neck for years? She ate and slept on my property. I raised her. How can you evaluate that? Besides, she's our gold mine. I did the math. If each man pays 10,000, we can make $500,000 a month. We'd be fine. Evan sighed. He had no idea where his wife spent the money. She'd said she was investing it in a profitable business. He didn't ask her any questions, though. He was living on his own, in someone else's house. He couldn't understand why Julia had chosen him. He was already old, almost 50 years old, and she was in the prime of life. However, if he had put his mind to it a little, he would have found the answer to that question. Angelica sobbed, covering her face with her hands. She thought she might be able to behave calmly, but no. Archie was busily putting out the lamps. He was an expert at lighting. Billy turned on the camera, pointed it at Julia. Well, he said, licking his lips, what a beautiful girl you are. You know what we want from you. Come on, be a good girl. Julia continued to sob. She felt like she was in a bad dream. That she'd wake up and she'd be 8 years old again with her daddy by her side. But the agony just wouldn't end. You can do something to make us happy, Billy said. Real bliss. Why are you scaring the girl? Harvey asked unhappily. He was the expert in psychological processing in this trio. Okay, Angelica, listen to me. I'll tell you something important. He came close to her, put his arm around her shoulders. Angelica tensed up. Harvey looked her in the eyes and began to tell her in a creeping voice something that made her stop sobbing and then literally burst into flames. The girl immediately calmed down and her tears seemed to dry up on their own. Really? She asked. You won't beat me? Torture me? No, Harvey replied with a smile. We don't do that sort of thing. Everything has to be with your consent only. But yesterday I already believed a man who deceived me. We're not like that, Harvey assured her. I'll be damned if I'm not. The girl calmed down. She looked at her customers with different eyes. They didn't seem so scary to her anymore. On the contrary, she felt a kind of sympathy for them. She suddenly wanted to spend time with them, to drink tea, to go to the movies. Angelica relaxed, sat in front of the camera and looked into the lens without fear. Billy sat down next to her and took her hand. Here we go, said the cameraman. Looking through the camera lens, Harvey concentrated. This wasn't the first girl he'd painted in his life. The other men also knew their task, and therefore they had no doubts. Everything would work out. Angelica smiled and began to do what the man had asked her to do a minute ago with the sincerity and frankness typical of a teenager. The owner of the house woke up at 7 in the morning without an alarm clock. How well she had slept. Julia was literally bursting with pride. What an enterprising woman she was. She had made $1 million out of nothing. Not only that, but she'd put her hated stepdaughter in her place. The main thing is that the girl should recover quickly. She still has to work and work. She's got her husband on the phone. Well, what do you think? Are they all there already? Asked the woman. Let's go. Evan nodded. They should be playing by now. 2 days should be enough time to recover, Julia told Evan. So start looking for new clients. Oh, Julia, Em exhaled. Hey, can I not go with you? You're going, and take your rifle, the woman demanded. You made a deal with that dandy. If he cheats, shoot him in the leg. So he knows not to mess with us? Evan nodded, but he wasn't really going to bring a gun, much less shoot. He didn't want to go after her because he was ashamed and scared. How would he look the girl in the eye now? How would he sell her to other men? It's a child after all. Here we are, Julia said into the void. We've come for our money. Did you like it? Did you get it all? Silence. Evan thought that the 3 villains were tired and were now asleep. It was 7 a.m. He found the light switch, turned on the light, and was stunned. Today, Billy did not look like the image he had created for agent work. He was smooth, shaven, his hair neat and even severe, and he wore an immaculate uniform. In fact, he rarely wore it. That was the reason for the pristine appearance of his pants and tunic. Billy reported his exploits to the highest authorities. Julia, nicknamed Black Widow, has long been of interest to our colleagues. Through various agent channels, information was received about possible crimes of this citizen. She worked both individually and with accomplices, the composition of which was constantly changing. Acting under the guise of clients, agreed with the accomplice Evan, the reward for entering into an intimate relationship with Julia. One of the conditions was the gang rape of the victim, for the purpose of further exploitation for sexual purposes. There was a murmur in the room. Even experienced police chiefs cringed when they heard this part of the report. The crime had been prevented through a concerted effort, Billy continued. The perpetrators have been apprehended. Initial interrogations have confirmed their involvement in the woman's disappearance. The materials have been handed over to the investigation. The colonel glowered. Sure, they'd entered the neighboring territory from that godforsaken neighborhood on the outskirts of Washington. But the end justified the means. What a joke. This Black Widow could have been involved in 2 murders. And she had an accomplice with a firearm. That's a whole organized group, if not a gang. Tell me about the illegal medical activity, he demanded of Billy. Oh yeah, the employee said and coughed. The cherry on the cake. Our heroine was performing illegal surgeries right at home. Guess what kind? The murmurs grew even stronger. The colonel was jubilant. Such a story would not be ashamed to show on the federal channels. When the investigation was over, of course, but that wouldn't take long. Billy and the other operatives would sit in the shadows. They couldn't shine. They were undercover, and it'll be him on TV, the senior man. It's all credit to him. Summarizing, said the colonel, addressing the high ranks. I have said, I say, and I will repeat. In these difficult times, when the hydra of crime is trying to raise its head, we need funding. Resources, and once again resources, both human and material. He voiced a decent sum, which made the central office representative stretch out his lips. Of course, they wouldn't get everything they asked for, but at least half of it. That's already a good help, thought the colonel, rejoicing in his triumph. When the meeting was over, the senior was sipping his legal coffee and cognac in his office with pleasure. After such a big operation, the main thing is not to rest on your laurels. Action. It is necessary to develop success, otherwise nothing will work. He was sure that the operatives either celebrated the triumph or rushed to work further. That's why he was surprised to see Billy on the doorstep. Hello, Comrade Colonel, he greeted the chief. I came here to shake hands. At ease, replied the senior officer. You've done a good job, I admit. But that's what your motherland called you for, right? Dare and act, as they say, move on. You'll get to my level someday. The colonel was being a little bit facetious. He'd never spent a day in the field himself. Here at headquarters, or as the operatives say in the rear, much more comfortable. There are fewer risks as well as work, but you are always visible. You are known and remembered. Billy is a good operative, the colonel thought. That's why he has no chance of promotion. Here I am, Comrade Colonel, he kept muttering, standing in front of his superior. Well, talk already, the senior man waved his hand. Do you want a vacation or a raise in pay? Ask for it. You'll get everything, but within reasonable limits, of course. I'm not speaking for myself. What will happen to her, Comrade Colonel? Our girl, Billy asked the leader. Today they could talk in the office, wear uniforms, and no hiding. What do you care? Asked the senior. Did you do your job? I did my job. Now go back to protecting the country from crime. I found a relative, Billy said. I called her. I need to help them out, give them a hand. But I'll need a couple of days to finalize it. Hey! The older man got up out of his chair. Is this your headache, huh? Whether they put the girl in an orphanage or not makes no difference. You've done your job. Any questions? I insist, Comrade Colonel, Billy said. You have to see every case through to the end. So we saved this child from the monster. What's next? What if she falls into the hands of other scoundrels? What if... Hey! Shouted the colonel. I don't understand anything at all. What are you, Mother Teresa? If he falls into the hands of other scoundrels, don't you sleep. Save him then. And if you don't like it... Billy had heard those words more than once. He was really hoping that after this big win, he'd finally be taken back to headquarters, that he wouldn't have to go undercover anymore, to sit in a stuffy room, smoking, trashy tobacco and driving beggars around. It was not the first time the older man said in that tone of voice, If you don't like it, go away. Will you answer for the bazaar, Comrade Colonel? Billy asked and came up close to the chief. He looked at him. He was tall, full, with black eyes. Not once had he said a kind word. He'd expected him to do great things, to accomplish things, and demanded that he work all day long. And now he didn't want to bring their operation to its logical conclusion. You little puppy, the older man replied to the impertinence. Who would you be if it weren't for me? I'll have you undercover until you retire. If you live to see it, you're wrong, Comrade Colonel, Billy said and raised his hand. What he did made the chief's eyebrows twitch upward. Maria cried without ceasing. As they drove from the airport, she told him their family history 100 times. That the brother had moved to Washington, D.C., and then died. That they didn't find out until 2 years after the death. That the brother's ex-wife refused to even tell them where the grave was. She wouldn't even say a word about her daughter. If we had known, would we have? The woman questioned. He was so smart but so secretive. My little brother. And you didn't even try to find any trace of him? Billy asked. No, Maria answered. I'm so grateful to you for finding me. I'm so grateful. You take care of her, Billy asked. The girl's been through a lot. Oh, she'll be like my own, said the woman. I don't have a daughter, only a son. But he's a big boy. Why did she do it? Greed, Billy shrugged. We can't prove it, of course, but she poisoned him. To get the house. Think about it. A man in the prime of his life suddenly dies. And 3 months before that, a will. Oh, she should be held to account, Maria blurted out. It's all right. She'll be in jail for a long time, Billy reassured her. There's a big crime trail. Talking to this woman was beginning to bore him. Fortunately, it wasn't a long drive. Angelica's father had picked a really nice place for his house. Quiet suburbia and a short drive to Washington. What followed was a touching introduction between aunt and niece. Billy even turned away from the idyllic scene. Angelica and Maria hugged for a long time and shed tears. Billy sighed and went to the car. He had a lot of problems of his own now. For one thing, he needs to look for a job. Cops retire early, of course, but 15 more years in the department. No, he couldn't take that much. Secondly, start a family. Yeah, he needs peace and harmony. Thirdly, wait. Angelica was talking. Wait, please. Come inside. I'll show you the house. You haven't seen anything, have you? I don't know, Billy exhaled. I kind of have to go. Please? The girl asked. Please. She wanted to tell him how much he'd done for her, and that now she would always think of him and remember him. That now in Leary's heart lived a model of a real man who would protect and help. But she'd never said those things, and so she couldn't find the right words. Just held Billy's hand and said, please. Please. All right. He exhaled and strode toward the cottage. Listen, do you have coffee in your house? And an ashtray? I'd really like a coffee and a smoke.